everyone, Elle Lamboy here, Vice President of Philanthropy for the Gettysburg Foundation, and I'm here to gear up another Museum Monday. But today we have a very special guest, a noted Lincoln scholar. He's authored more than 52 books and was recently here in Gettysburg last November to deliver his second address for Dedication Day at the Soldiers National Cemetery. When Chris and I wanted to feature artifacts on Lincoln, there was no one better than Mr. Harold Holzer. Let's see what he and Chris are checking out in the Gettysburg Museum of the American Civil War.
Welcome again to this installment of Museum Monday. We're here with esteemed Lincoln scholar Harold Holzer. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Holzer. One of the things we try to do with the Gettysburg Museum of the Civil War is tell the story not just of the Battle of Gettysburg, but to put the battle in context. Talk about the events that led up to the battle and also the consequences and legacy of the battle in the American Civil War. And where we're standing right now is outside one of the main galleries where we address one of the, pivotal moments before the outbreak of hostilities, which of course is the election of 1860. Abraham Lincoln is elected President of the United States. What were some of the issues involved in the election of 1860?
Well, of course, the one and only issue in various iterations was slavery. Abraham Lincoln and his party platform were pledged to absolutely restrict the spread of slavery anywhere in the Southern Territory you see behind us as it extended west to the Pacific Ocean. Under no circumstances could slavery spread. His Democratic opponent, principal Democratic opponent, Stephen Douglas, who you see there in a song sheet cover, believed that each of the new territories should hold referenda, and white citizens should decide whether or not slavery should be allowed in those new territories. John Breckinridge, the Southern Democratic candidate, believed slavery could exist anywhere as per the Dred Scott decision, which had legalized slavery and sort of broken all of the covenants that prevented its spread above the Missouri Compromise line in the first place. And then there was a fourth candidate, John Bell, of a new party called the Constitutional Union Party, who was barely represented because there was barely a campaign. But one piece of good Gettysburg trivia is that his vice presidential running mate was Edward Everett, who wound up coming to Gettysburg, I think, as the main attraction on November 19th, 1863, and ended up as a footnote again. So,
when Americans today, they think about a presidential campaign or an election year or midterms, they're usually inundated with campaign commercials, signs are everywhere, you hear the candidates constantly. In the 1860s, in the mid-19th century, how did candidates campaign for office? What did Lincoln do in the build-up to the election?
Well, campaigns were definitely all-consuming. So the first part of your recollection absolutely applied to the 1860 election that's displayed here. Signs, yes. Posters, yes. Buttons, in primitive form because there was no celluloid. There were tintypes in brass enclosures. People wore them on ribbons and pinned them to their clothes. Yes. Parades, absolutely. This display case contains a Wide Awake pamphlet, and the Wide Awakes were a club of torch-bearing, raincoat-wearing young people who scared the hell out of the South because the Southerners thought they were paramilitary and that they were going to finish the election and march southward. So in terms of military threats, the South believed Lincoln's Wide Awake team was an army in formation. So all of the above, nighttime parades and rallies and newspaper activity and speeches by surrogates. So the big difference is that Abraham Lincoln, true to the tradition of the 19th century, did no campaigning for himself at all. What he did is stay home, write letters, all of them private and confidential because he didn't think candidates should speak. Douglas, he was in a desperate spot. The Democratic Party was broken in two. He had almost no chance. So he decided to visit his mother. Now, the thing about it was that he was located in Chicago and his mother was in Vermont. So to visit his mother, he had to take a train trip. But rather than cross the Great Lakes route, he decided the best way to campaign was to go south, over, and north. So he spent 3 weeks on the road, and every time the train stopped for wood and water, he made a speech.
So he used it to his advantage then?
He used it to his advantage, but it was attacked and mocked. There were pictures of little Stephen being spanked by his mother, and his mother was the Columbia, the symbol of the country. So candidates did not campaign. I don't think, probably if you surveyed half of the people or all of the people who came here, I'm sure that a big number would like to see candidates stay home more often and let documents and pictures, stand in for them successfully, because it was a totally different milieu in 1860.
I think Americans today are very used to negative campaigning. Does that exist in 1860?
Our negative campaigning is so rose-colored compared to the negative campaigning in 1860. It was brutal. Remember, every newspaper in the city was part of a political party. So Philadelphia had a Republican paper and a Democratic paper.
Yep.
Pittsburgh had a Republican and Democratic. Every city had a Republican and Democratic. And if we think that MSNBC and Fox News are slanted, that was nothing like the reports in those newspapers. So they did nothing but attack. Lincoln was a baboon. He believed in racial equality, which was considered, the end of your political career on a national scale. Douglas was a sneak. He was a drunk, and so it went. They were lashing attacks, but both of these guys were used to that. That's the kind of campaign they waged in public 2 years earlier when they ran against each other for Senate, and kind of invented the idea of the political debates that we take for granted.
Famous Lincoln-Douglas
The
debates.
famous Lincoln-Douglas, not for the presidency, but for the U.S. Senate from Illinois. They never met during the campaign of 1860.
So Lincoln's elected president.
Right?
What's the impact of the election of 1860 besides that? So Lincoln assumes the presidency. What does that mean for the country?
Well, even before he's elected, the response is that the South will not accept the verdict. And you can see what their argument was on the map in the vitrine here. All of the southern states voted for Breckinridge. All of the northern states voted for Lincoln. So the South said, sectional victory, it doesn't count. We're leaving. I mean, you can't do a do-over, so we're leaving. And as early as December, just a month after the election, South Carolina held a secession convention that would have happened earlier had it not been for a smallpox epidemic in the capital, in Columbia. They met in Charleston a few weeks later instead. So the Union is dissolving before Lincoln's eyes. 7 states are, by their own verdict, no longer part of the United States by the time he gets on a train in Springfield and heads to Washington. So he is coming to Washington presiding over a fractured country, half of which is not accepting the result of a democratic election because it didn't suit them. And no one has ever assumed the presidency with more of a crisis at hand. He tried, as we know, for 6 weeks to see if he could talk some of the Unionists in the South back into the Union, and then Fort Sumter, and then it was too late. And as Lincoln said, and the war came.
We have this giant mural here on the side of the gallery. It's a photograph, and it depicts Abraham Lincoln. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in this image?
Yeah, so here I have been telling you there was no campaigning, and right away you point to the one exception to the rule. But it's a great exception. Lincoln, again, no campaigning, no appearances. What is he going to do? A big parade, a Republican parade, goes right past his house in August 1860. He has to just wave to them, so he stands at his front door and looms above everybody. You get a really good view of how tall he was in comparison to the average height guy of his day. I don't think he's standing on anything. He's just towering over everybody on his doorstep and watches the parade. A photograph is made by a local photographer, and so he breaks his rule. The final float goes by the house, and Lincoln gets on his horse and follows the parade out to the state fairgrounds, where inevitably they say, Mr. Lincoln, we need to hear from you, we need to hear from you. So he gets up on the platform and he says in about 15 minutes that he can't really give speeches, it's not proper, but he manages to give a little speech. And that's his one campaign appearance in 1860. And the result is this fantastic photograph. And it really, what it shows you, aside from Lincoln breaking the rule, right, of not campaigning, look at the tumult, look at the excitement.
The enormous crowd,
And you got a ladies section down here, and you've got people neighbors and friends, I presume, in the upper windows there.
It's an amazing photograph. Well, Mr. Holzer, thank you so much for being here and bringing to life this gallery in the Museum of the American Civil War. I encourage you to come to Gettysburg, explore the museum, explore the battlefield. But until then, we'll see you on the next segment of Museum Monday.
Thanks.